Hey everyone, welcome to this edition, special edition, I should say, of the Politically Incorrect podcast. I'm Jim Williams, your host. Our guest is Avneet Singh, the founder and editor of The Voice of Mankind, whose article appears in today's edition of News Talk Florida, and it's titled The Aftermath of the Perfect Storm, the Long-Term Consequences of the Coronavirus Pandemic. Avneet, it is a pleasure, as always, to have you, my friend. It's tough times we are facing here. Let's talk a little bit about this article, the genesis of it,
Absolutely.
and where do we go from here?
Yes, absolutely, Jim. Thank you for having me on. So, let's get started.
So let's talk about, we're talking about the aftermath, and in this particular, well written, by the way, story, we're talking about first the economic impact. So let's go to that situation. Where are we economically going to be after this pandemic clears?
Yes, so as you know, the biggest story as a result of this perfect storm of the global pandemic is going to be the $2.2 trillion of economic stimulus bill that has
Mm-hmm.
just been passed. So it's really money that's printed out of thin air, and there's also gonna be quantitative easing infinite. What it really means is that the government will print as much money as it needs out of thin air without any assets like gold to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
So common sense tells us it's not a good idea to just print money. Economics tells us that this has long-term consequences. So some of the consequences is just supply and demand. If there's more dollars floating around in circulation, it will
Mm-hmm.
lead to a fall in dollar prices over the short to medium term. I mean that
Mm-hmm.
$2 trillion hasn't hit us yet. That tsunami isn't over us yet because it's still just started. But in the next 3 to 6 months, as that money comes pouring in, we'll see a fall in dollar prices, and that on it itself will leads to more consequences. Like imports are gonna go be more expensive. There's
Mm-hmm.
already a falling demand leading to stagnation. And as you know, stagnation with rising prices and inflation leads to stagflation, which is a
Right.
really bad place to be.
Absolutely. Now, we know that the $2 trillion stimulus package has been passed. There has been conversations, as I'm sure you know, about actually even upping that to perhaps another
Yes.
2 or 3 trillion dollars. How would a bill like that impact what you just presented, which at 2 billion is a very bad situation? It's got to make it worse if they go into a higher stimulus package of above north of $2 trillion.
Yes, it's not a good place to be because partly it says common sense tells us it's not good idea to just print
Mm-hmm.
money without any backing assets, but it's just
Right.
gonna make things worse and worse. But there's also the moral hazard. Where is this money going to? If you look at the
Right.
2.2 trillion dollars, 500 billion of that is gonna go to individuals in the
Mm-hmm.
form of unemployment benefits and other the $1,200 check that
Sure.
people are gonna get. So there's a lot of there's also 300 billion plus that's gonna go to local government institution, government bodies.
Mm-hmm.
There's 300 billion that's going to small essential businesses. Uh, so it's a lot of inefficient businesses, a lot of government, smaller the local governments that had government debt even when times were good, so they are going to be bailed out, and that's a very bad precedent in the sense that if you cannot be successful in really bad times, how are you going to survive the next 2 years? So it's not just the economic impact; it's also the setting really bad precedent that the government will come in and bail you out. I mean, again, it's arguable. Yes, they're essential businesses, but if they're essential businesses and local governments, they should be able to not be in debt in good times.
Veet, I've been speaking to a couple of different economists, one a conservative economist, another a more liberal columnist. Economist. Both of whom actually came upon the same conclusion, and that was that small businesses are really not going to see the benefit of this $1 trillion stimulus package, that it really is going to go to the multinational corporations. They will see the benefits. The small business owner, by the time he or she gets it, is not going to help them.
That is correct, and again, it's partly driven by the government bureaucracy because it's hard to navigate the government bureaucracy and to do what is required to um, to benefit from these loans. So, larger corporations will have the resources and the people, and they will benefit more from it. Smaller
Mhm.
businesses just won't have enough resources to benefit from it.
Let's talk for a second about what would have been, in your opinion, a better way to do this than just a bailout? Would it have been perhaps to do a clean bill by which they would give a one-time stipend to families of X amount of dollars, and then secondarily craft a bill that would have in some way crafted a fair situation for smaller businesses and the impact of larger businesses, but in a less comprehensive bill from a standpoint of giving away as much money as they did. They rolled everything into one bill, which I personally thought was irresponsible, because you're trying to take care of everybody at one time in a bill that you crafted in in literally less than a week.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and another interesting um, another interesting fact is that it's more than 800 pages. I mean, I don't know if anyone, even the congressman or whoever is drafted that bill, even read through it thoroughly. It's like 800 pages long. I struggle
Hmm.
to read through that. So I think there's a lot in there, and you're correct. It's just just stuffed with um, bailouts and benefits. But really, what should have been done is that we should have fixed the economy in the first place. Because when we
Hmm.
said, 6 months ago that times were good, times were
Hmm.
not good. It's a stock market was high, but there was record government debt in local government and government
Hmm.
bodies. There was record corporate debt. The automobile debt was high. Consumer debt was high, and more than half the people in this country did not have more than $500 savings. So you
Hmm.
knew even at it's so-called good times, it's a the high street, as they call it, it's and the individual small businesses were
Right.
struggling. So we should have had to build a robust economy rather than just financially engineer ourselves into a great economy. However, to answer your question, once the global pandemic hits us, once this perfect storm hits us, which is like
Hmm.
a global pandemic
Right.
over, and with a really bad economy, it's there's very little we can do, because the individuals with very little savings, who are mostly employed in the retail sector,
Hmm.
don't really have any prospect for any new jobs for the next 6 months. So we have to bail them out. You have to bail small businesses like gyms, food
Right.
delivery companies, the tourism sector,
Hmm.
hotels. You have to bail them out. Otherwise, they'll just go bankrupt and have to shut down. So it's I think the government is in a difficult position, and for once I support them, because they did the right thing, but they should have done the right thing 6 months ago, when there was a broken economy propped up by
Hmm.
financial engineering.
The other part of that 800-page bill, and I think you touched on it, was the fact that there was a lot of pork in there, um, a lot of projects that were quite beneficial, or a lot of bailouts, I should say, that were quite beneficial to certain senators in certain states. something
Correct.
something you would have hoped would not have been in a bill that was meant to help the neediest groups out there.
Correct. Yeah, that is correct. I mean, it's a bill where different states have got differential preferential treatment, and it's what you expect, because it's a bill passed and drafted by politicians, and they have to give preference to their states. It shouldn't be. We expect to it to be bipartisan, because you help everyone, but it's in the real world. I We can see here's a good example of where the government hasn't been bipartisan.
I mean, there's something that I think is fascinating about this, and I'd love your take on it because we're going to transition in a moment over to the social impact on this. And that is, we actually have, for the first time, a crisis that is a red state versus blue state crisis. You have
Absolutely.
the
Absolutely.
governors of California, you're Gavin Newsom, who's your governor out there in the great state of California. You've got folks like the governor of, the governor of Washington State. You've got Cuomo in New York. You've got Larry Hogan, who's a Republican in Maryland. You've got guys like the governor Mike DeWine in Ohio. Those are Republicans who are, were early to shutter in place and early to try to get on top of this. Then you got guys like DeSantis in Florida and others. Governor of Georgia yesterday, Kemp, saying that basically he's now on board with this because he just found out that it could be transmitted by people who are asymptomatic.
Yes.
It's like everybody in the world knew this. How is it possible that the governor of the state of Georgia is either stupid or a liar? I mean, there's only two things that happen there. Okay, you're either lying to me or you're stupid, and if you're that damn stupid, you should leave government. So we have a pandemic that is literally red state, blue state, and if the president doesn't
Absolutely.
tell me that it's necessary, then I damn sure am not going to do it because I don't want to go against the president.
Absolutely. And there was news yesterday that in South Carolina, people are treating this almost as a holiday. They say
Yeah.
their shops are busier than they were on Black Friday. It's like, why don't you have social distancing? So you're right. It's then the blue states like New York and California, they monitored people's their anonymized cell phone records, and they say yes, people are practicing social distancing and trying to avoid infecting each other. Whereas
Right.
in the red states, there's very little of it. People are on the beaches in Florida, they are shopping in South Carolina, and even the government is the governor of Georgia, as you rightly pointed out, is he's just discovering science. So you're absolutely spot on. It's a blue state versus red state, and there's a completely different response to the crisis between the blues and the red states.
Now you say on this topic of social impact that our liberty could be diminished unless we be vigilant. What does that sentence mean to you?
Right. So the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, and the Electronic Freedom Foundation, they've already sounded the warning that laws are being passed through under the radar or against the noise that could diminish our liberty. And some public interest technologies like Bruce Schneier, he's also part of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the EFF. He also said that this could have a bigger impact on our liberties than even 911. So to give you two examples, the Earn It bill, which weakens encryption we use in our cell phones and our computers. So this Earn It bill forces companies to build a backdoor to allow government to snoop on the data. The second bill is the FISA, which is Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which actually applies to all Americans and their online activity. So these bills
Mhm.
have been passed, which allow the government to weaken encryption standards. And we know once you weaken encryption standard, doesn't it not only makes it easy for the government, it also makes it easier for malicious users to hack into your account, to sniff the
Right.
network traffic. So definitely there is, you know, rules are being passed and things are being done which against this background of noise, which could diminish our liberty and our freedoms.
I think another point in the social aspect of it is that now so many of us are working remotely that you're going to look at some of these companies and they're going to say, you know what, we just realized something. We don't need a lot of corporate travel anymore. We don't need necessarily to have 25 or 50 people around the office. We can do this by having people work from home and still get the desired results. Now, that's obviously not going to be the case in all businesses, but you're seeing that. You're also seeing something which uh, is troubling to me. And again, obviously, these are things I'm tossing out for you to comment on. And that is, we are seeing with regards to such necessary situations right now as the masks that need to be used by our healthcare workers and doctors, and along with the ventilators and other things, we're seeing a ridiculous amount of price gouging. I mean, go if anybody goes online today and tries to buy hand sanitizer, first of all, good luck. Second of all, it's going for a ridiculously 4 or 5 time markup. I mean, literally, in the midst of a pandemic, we have created what a sociological disaster in so much as you see on one hand people doing all kinds of wonderful things to keep people safe and to do things right. Now, on the other hand, people who are exploiting this opportunity, just as you said, to benefit and profiteer off of a pandemic.
Yeah, it's I just don't know what to say about that. Is because it's just, as you rightly pointed out, what kind of people do we have where that just gonna try to profit off a pandemic? I mean, there's very little government can do. It's like people hoarding, from simple things and essential stuff
Mhm.
like toilet paper and hand sanitizers
Right,
and trying to sell bottled water and
right,
mass on Facebook Marketplace. It's not that they're gonna make lots of money out of it, but I think it's just the act that the people will try to do something else, they try to profit off pandemic. I think it's just part of human nature. It's very unfortunate, but that has been with us for the millennia, and I think it's unlikely to disappear.
right. It's funny in the article also you talk about culture changes, and I think we just touched a little bit on it before. You feel that people will become more polarized and hyper individualist and distrustful of each other. Um, that's not a good cocktail of a mix either.
No, again, it's like, pretty unfortunate because usually crisis brings people together because, especially crisis like a global
Hmm.
pandemic. It's like if it affects us all, so let's all get together and fight this. But
Hmm.
we don't have a healthy society in the sense, people have already become very individualistic.
Hmm.
They'd rather spend time with their dog and their smartphone than with their neighbors. So when we'll have this background, and then and in terms of a crisis, people go towards whatever they're comfortable with, and people are more comfortable with their dog and their smartphone. So it's this crisis makes us levitate more towards what we're comfortable with. And the other interesting fact is, they say it's if you want to acquire a new habit or if you want to get rid of an old habit, you do it for maybe a couple of months. So what's going
Hmm.
to happen with this pandemic is that because this is a forced social isolation for 1 to 2 months, is gonna lead to people realizing that, hey, I don't need anyone in my life. I'm happy alone, or I'm happy with my small little family. I don't need my neighbors. I don't really need friends. I survived a pandemic on my own. So it's and again, this has been brought up by peer-reviewed journals as well as popular media, that the worry is it will lead to people being more polarizing, less trusting of their neighbors, um, just happy living their life with their smartphone and their dog. So it's not a good position to be in, and I think it's definitely worth highlighting, because when we highlight this, we are conscious of it and we can do something about it.
The other point in that system that you're talking about is the fact that if you are sheltered around family and relatives and also or neighbors, friends, there tends to be a certain amount of time you don't spend that much time normally with them all at one time. Um, I noticed that some of my friends um, are taking a walk because they quote unquote have to get away from their family. Because again, we are all creatures of habit, which means we're not with each other 24 hours a day. We live with each other in a very structured way. And once you create some riff in that structure, then culturally you're off balance. And when you get off balance culturally, you tend to overthink things, or as you just said, very far more eloquently than I did, that you tend to begin to hyper individualize, because you're like, wait a minute, you know, I don't need other people to think for me. I don't need help here. I'll just do it myself. And it does culturally change it. There's no question about it.
Right. Yeah, and I think this is a unique crisis in the sense
Mhm.
it's a crisis where you don't want to interact with your neighbors to the same
Mhm.
extent. You don't want to physically interact with us, so it forces a social isolation on you,
Right.
and which in over a couple of months almost becomes a habit. So I think it's just something that worth highlighting time and time again. That once this crisis is over, we must make an effort to reach out to our community, to reach out to our neighbors, our friends and families, reconnect with them and strengthen those bonds, rather than just you know sink into the comfortable life of smartphones and dogs, and taking a walk alone. So I think it's just it's just a good time to bring up the famous saying by Carl Jung, who was a famous psychologist. He says, unless we make the subconscious conscious, it will direct our life and we'll call it fate. So this should not be our fate. We should have stronger communities. We should have
Mhm.
stronger relations with our neighbors. And this is probably not a good time to build it. But once this is over, we should definitely make an effort to reach out to everyone around us and build stronger communities.
You also touch on the political changes, and the government is likely to get even bigger and play a more prominent role in our lives, which is ironic given the fact that you know the Republicans of yesteryear, if you will, the Ronald Reagan Republicans, even to an extent the George Herbert Walker Bush and Republicans, were small government and you know and fiscally responsible. That,
Absolutely.
that
Small
has not
government,
been the
low
case in
deficit.
quite a while now. Uh,
Right.
they've taken a role which has been counterintuitive to the old William F. Buckley supply side economics.
Absolutely. I mean, it is another interesting conversation I had with the members of the Libertarian Party, and I asked them why, you are clear to, I asked the members of the Libertarian Party, that they are closer to the American ideals we all want, which is, individualism.
Mhm.
We should be we should stand up on our own feet fiscally and economically. A small government, low government debt, less government interference. That's what everybody wants. But I asked the Libertarian Party, like, why aren't more people attracted to the values that you have? And they say, well, it's people, even though they love these values, but nothing beats free money. Right? Nothing beats a government that wants to help you. So it's a lot of this debt that we have taken on is because it's just money, cheap money being doled out.
Hmm.
That's attractive to everyone, and as a result of this, the government gets bigger because the government has to raise more taxes. The government gets involved in dealing with things it doesn't really need to.
Hmm.
So it's definitely has serious political consequences, and it also means that our government isn't really what people say they want, but it's what they really want, which is to give them free money and have the government interfering in places where it doesn't need to go.
Well, in many regards, some people like it because they cede responsibility. It's like, okay, cool, the government will take care of that for me. Um, I don't have to think about that myself. They'll be happy to do it for me. Um, I'm not certain myself. I'm not real crazy about the idea of the government doing anything for me. That at least I don't know a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. I think a good. I mean, there's plenty of examples of this. I mean, one example is this newly passed laws, both at the federal and the local level, which means that if people are unable to pay their rent, they cannot be evicted.
Right.
So yeah, I understand we need to have a humane, altruistic culture, but
Right.
everyone, I asked this question, like, what is it that why don't people have more than a few months savings? Like more than half the country is less than $500 in savings. Aren't people scared? I mean, how can people live year to year, decade after decade with virtually no savings? Aren't you scared? When there's, you're bound to have a crisis someday. But but we have allowed these problems to persist for years, and now the government really has no choice but to step in, because if people are evicted at this time of this crisis and with the
Mhm.
shutdown and a global pandemic in place, it will cause. I mean, you can just imagine it'll cause a complete collapse of the society. So the government really has no choice. And even though I
Right.
disagree with them, this is, I would do the same under the circumstances today, because we are past the point where we could fix things. Now we just have
Mm.
to be reactive, because we can see this tsunami of global pandemic and economic crisis rushing towards us.
Avneet, one of the things that I think is somewhat ironic is that, you know, whether you agree or disagree with Senator Bernie Sanders or not and what he does, I can't. We everybody's saying, well, we're so afraid of the possibility of socialism, and of course, Tony Blair once said that if the United States was a socialist country, they'd be the worst at it. Um, what we just did with the $2 trillion stimulus package is about as close to being, you know, being involved in socialism as you can get.
Absolutely. I think Peter Schiff is he's a CEO of Euro Pacific Capital. He's a well-known economist, very active on the media as well as social media. He just did a podcast about 4 days ago, and he says America is now a socialist country. And two good examples of this is that you cannot evict people from your home even when they do not pay, handing out money to government, handing out government to small local government, handing out money to individuals, propping up small and large inefficient businesses that should go bankrupt. These are all the hallmarks of socialism. So we already be taking socialist, we have socialist program, even though they might be short term, but we already have socialist program. I would rather have let people be self-sufficient, let them take care of
Mhm.
themselves, and we shouldn't be in a situation where the government has to help us for the sake of um, maintaining, for the sake of, in order to prevent the whole society from collapsing, because that's what the government has to do. I mean, the $2 trillion stimulus bill was absolutely necessary. Without this, everything would just have collapsed. But that's not the situation position we should be in.
Well, this is actually then, given what you've said in the article, which I strongly recommend everybody take a look at, and that is, I mean, at the end of the day, we're putting a Band-Aid on a severe cut. Um, we're not we're not solving the problem. We're just kicking the can down the road, which is something,
Absolutely.
unfortunately, that we've done for years to the point which, as you said, we have no choice now. The choice is not let people, flounder. We can't. So, how do we get ourselves out of this?
I think the immediate need is three immediate problems that everyone will be affected with. One is obviously the pandemic that lets everyone stay healthy and safe, take
Right.
care of our families. That's immediate in need. The second one is the worry. The second biggest worry is the worry of falling demand because so many businesses are shut. Tourism, gyms, a lot of restaurants, in travel. There's a lot of businesses that are shut and is falling demand. The
Mhm,
third issue we need to be, keep worry about is this $2.2 trillion stimulus, this flood of money that's going to come in. It's going to destabilize our economy with definitely with inflation, with rising prices. So how do we, I think the next 3 to 6 months is just going to be spent dealing with this tsunami of the pandemic, the rising the flood of money and the falling demand. So once that is over, it will be a good time to reflect. Do we just continue with more of the same? Do we try to maintain the status quo at all costs, which could go up to $4 trillion, as you rightly pointed out?
mhm,
Or do we look at, do we reflect on what our economy was before the crisis, which is an economy with mostly retail jobs, where we didn't have much of a we had high debt, but the stock market was propped up by financial engineering. So I think it's a it's every crisis is also an opportunity. Do we just carry
mhm.
on as before, or do we reflect and build something new? So I think that's something that we will think of and investigate more over the 3 months once these immediate problems are taken care of.
Absolutely. One final thing before we step out is that perhaps, and you hit it perfectly right on the head, that because we really don't have what we used to have in this country, which was basically a vibrant middle class, you've got lots of the haves and a lot, much more of the have-nots, and that creates a void in that vacuum. And that vacuum is what cost us and got us into this mess in the first place, where people have to go to $2 trillion and bail out. But hopefully, as you say, and I agree wholeheartedly, in the next 3 months or so, 6 months, um, we'll begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it won't be a train coming the other way. So hopefully that's going to work out. Let's talk a little bit about your group and how people can get involved with Voice of Mankind.
Yeah, so Voice of Mankind is a non-profit think tank, and we work to influence public opinion on issues that are relevant to all of us. So you can look us up on our website. It's voiceofmankind.org, or you can just Google search for Voice of Mankind. Please connect with us on social media, on Facebook or Twitter. And I look forward to be back, Jim, very soon to talk about. I look forward to be back very soon. Thank you.
Avneet Singh, founder and editor of Voice of Mankind. Thanks for joining us today, and it's always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you for having me on.